Hello. Walter Rauschenbusch, page 291. In chapter 6 of Christianity and the Social Crisis, the subhead now, after the previous first subhead of this chapter, was the church of its real estate. This is the church and its income. The income of the church in former times and in other countries was mainly derived from landed wealth or from state subsidies. In our country, this is 1907, the churches, with few exceptions, are maintained by the current contributions of their living members. It is therefore of the utmost importance to the financial welfare of the churches that their members shall have a regular and secure income from which they can readily support the church. Thus the church has the greatest possible interest in a just and even distribution of wealth. The best community for church support at present is a comfortable middle-class neighborhood. A social system which would make moderate wealth approximately universal would be the best soil for robust churches. If, on the contrary, society tends to divide into a few rich families and a mass of poor wage earners, the troubles of the church are before it. We all understand that a man receiving $500 a year cannot pay as much to religious institutions as a man receiving $5,000. But the universal impression seems to be that he can fairly be expected to contribute the same proportion of his income. The Old Testament law of tithing is very generally recommended as the ideal to be followed by all, on the supposition that 10% of an income of $500 is the same proportion as 10% of an income of $5,000. This commercial method of calculation leaves some fundamental facts of human nature out of account, and has inflicted a grave wrong on the poorer portion of our churches. Dr. Ernst Engel, long the eminent chief of the Prussian Bureau of Statistics, compiled from a large number of family budgets the proportion expended for various purposes. The following table contains the main results, and then Engel has a table showing the various expenditures for subsistence, clothing, lodging, firing and lighting, which we would call heat, education, worship, etc., legal protection, care of health, etc. And then Rauschenbusch comments on the table. The minor items of this table will vary somewhat in different countries, according to local prices and customs, but the main deduction, which is known in political economy as Engel's law of consumption, is as universal as human nature. It will be noticed that the first 4 items include those expenditures which satisfy the animal necessities of the body: food, shelter, and warmth. The other 4 satisfy the higher needs. As the income rises, the proportion spent on the first group sinks, and the proportion spent on the second group rises. Within the first group, the proportion spent for lodging, heat, and light is the same in all classes, and the proportion for clothing nearly so. But the proportion spent for food is far larger with the poorest families. The human body has certain imperious demands for its maintenance, and these demands cannot be compressed below a certain minimum. If the income is small, the largest part must go simply for stoking the human machine, and the higher needs of the social, intellectual, and religious nature must be starved. If food prices rise, that proportion will be still greater. The nearer the people descend toward the poverty line, the less will be available for the higher wants. If then any average wage earner in the churches has actually given 1/10 of his income, he deserves profound respect. It is heroic giving for him. And if we have allowed the impression to prevail that the giving of 1/10 by all was equal giving for all, we have unwittingly inflicted a grievous injustice on the poorer church members. In every church working among the poorer classes, there are a number who contribute nothing or are dependents on the church instead of supporters. Every season of economic distress depresses additional families below this line. But some self-respecting people may choose a different line of action. If their church membership involves too heavy a tax, they drop away. Other causes and motives may work in the same direction, but the pressure exerted by the systematized giving of the modern church and the insistence on this virtue in pulpit teaching must alienate some. They simply cannot afford church life. The fraternal societies, which offer insurance and mutual help in sickness and death, have increased immensely among the wage earners, while the church, confessedly, has lost ground among them. Is this due merely to religious indifference and unbelief, or to poverty coupled with self-respect? I am not in a position to prove this, but I offer it as a working hypothesis to explain in part the alienation of the working classes from the churches. Certainly the churches are deeply affected by the economic pressure resting on the wage workers. Engel's law deserves serious consideration from the point of view of church finances. I have never come across any discussion of it, nor any indication that it is understood in its bearings on church life. If the people become poor, they cannot afford to share in a self-supporting church. The unequal distribution of wealth thus tends to strip the churches of their poorer clientage, he puts it. The same inequality of wealth threatens the churches in other ways on the side of the strong who profit by it. If a church is composed of many wage workers with a few well-to-do families, the contributions of these few will be of inordinate importance to the financial affairs of the church. The departure of a single family may mean that the church can no longer pay the minister's salary nor support itself. Such a condition will almost inevitably breed an unwholesome difference at some points and an unwholesome jealousy at others. It would be strange, too, if those who are the financial stays of the church did not have the feeling that their wishes ought to be decisive about the coming and going of the minister and other matters deeply affecting the spiritual life. But the preference of wealthy men and their wives may select a pastor who is more of a courtier than a saint. The fundamental evil in the union of church and state is that worldly men, with their interests and points of view, dominate the life of the church, which ought to be guided by moral and Christian interests. Point of contact between the church and the state was frequently the local nobleman who had the right of patronage and could present the living to some candidate of his own selection. It was this which caused the disruption of the Church of Scotland in 1843. Church and state are separate with us, Rauschenbusch speaking as a Baptist, but the essence of the evil may creep in once more as soon as the mass of church members are financially weak and a few persons hold the financial existence of the church in their hands. Church democracy and voluntarism presuppose approximate financial equality. Put in a link to Jacques Ellul's discussion of what happened when church and state first got together officially. The subversion of Christianity in the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries, as Ellul sees it anyway.